Commencing the day 2 of the Environment and Energy Conclave, I would request the dignitaries to please come to the dais. We have with us Dr. Alok Roy, Senior Vice President, the Bengal Chamber, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General of BEE, Mr. Anindya Chatterjee, Principal Consultant, ERM India, Mr. Sanjay Seth, Chief Economist, BEE, Mr. Saurav Kumar, Managing Director, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, Mr. George Yulin, Head of Operations, EBTC, Mr. Lalit Puri, Business Head, Professional Lighting Solutions, Philips India Limited, Mr. Padam Prakash Gupta, Managing Director, Techno Electric and Engineering Company Limited, Mr. Debe Mukherjee, Key Resource Person of the Energy and Environment Committee of the Bengal Chamber, Mr. Narayan Sarup Nigam, CMD of WBACDCL, will be joining very shortly. Thank you. May we request Mr. Debe Mukherjee to take the session forward. He was here, so we can start. Yes, sir. So may we request Mr. Mukherjee to take the session forward. We'll request Mr. Whelan to please take his seat.
A very good morning and a warm welcome to all of you for the second day's deliberations on our annual Energy Conclave event. We are particularly delighted today to have Dr. Ajay Mathur with us, who has always shared a very special bond with the Chamber. We are delighted, sir, to have you with us and are deeply grateful to you for having agreed to grace with your presence today's inaugural session. The theme for this year's conclave has been a very pertinent subject: sustainable resource management. Taking sustainable resource management, the second day will deliberate on sustainable power, which is a very important component of sustainable resource management. We have amongst us this morning Mr. Saurav Kumar, Managing Director of Energy Efficiency Services Limited, a super ESCO as they are normally called, trendsetters in designing and implementing energy efficiency, energy services performance contracting projects, and various demand-side management initiatives. Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, for having come over this morning. And I am delighted to announce that his company, EESL, is sponsoring this morning's program. We also have amongst us Mr. Sanjay Seth from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Thank you very much, sir, for having come over. We have Mr. Lalit Puri from Philips India Limited, one of the key players in lighting solutions in India. Thank you very much, sir, for coming over. We have Mr. Anindya Chatterjee, Principal Consultant from ERM India Private Limited. Delighted to welcome Mr. Nigam. Thank you very much, sir, for having taken the time to come over and share this morning's session with us. And we also have Mr. Jörg Julin, I hope I've got your name right, Head of Operations, European Business and Technology Center, India. I would now request our Senior Vice President of the Chamber, BCCI, Dr. Alok Roy, to please address, and then we will start with the theme address or the inaugural address for the second day with Dr. Mathur. Dr. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. Dignitaries on dais, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to you all to day 2 of the Environment and Energy Conclave. As Swindell explained, sustainability conveys the idea of a balance between human needs and environmental concerns. They should provide for the needs of current as well as future generations, while conserving natural resources. Sustainable development needs to be understood in its many dimensions. There is the temporal aspect. Development today cannot be at the expense of development tomorrow. Sustainability also needs to be envisaged in its composite whole as a dynamic system of interdependent forces, economic, social, and environmental. The moot point of discussion for day 2 is sustainable power. Why sustainable power? Primary energy is mostly transformed into electricity, and hence the focus on the power sector. Progress in energy efficiency and access to clean technology and fuels is ongoing. Efficient power plants, larger use of renewable resources, low loss power transmission from the basis for a reliable energy supply. Day 1 sessions have already taken us through sustainable resources, the effective management of our primary energy resources from the varied spectrum given, coupled with the need for sustainable ecosystems, are the driving principles behind domestic economic policies and even our foreign policy. Many countries have committed to the principles of sustainable development and are incorporating them into their national policies and strategies. According to reports, India has the world's 5th largest electricity generation capacity, which currently stands at 243 gigawatts. The power sector in India is highly diverse and varied commercial resources for power generations like coal, natural gas, hydro, oil, nuclear, as well as unconventional sources of energy like solar, wind, biogas, and agriculture. The demand for power has been growing at a rapid rate and overtaken the supply, leading to power shortages in spite of manifold growth in power generations over the years. Today, we will explore the best practices adopted and the adversities faced as power demand multiplies and the possible bridge to the demand-supply gap by way of policy reforms. The power sector offers tremendous opportunities for investing companies due to the huge size of the market, growth potential, and returns available on capital. Industrialization, urbanization, population growth, depletion of coal reserves, increasing import of coal, crude oil, and other energy sources, and the rising concern over climate changes have put India in a critical position. It has now become imperative to take a tough stance between balancing economic development and environmental sustainability. One of the primary challenges being to alter its existing energy mix, which is dominated by coal, to a larger share of cleaner and sustainable sources of energy. I am sure that we all will have an interesting and motivating second day. Thank you very much.
Now for the, the inaugural theme address of the conclave, may I request Dr. Ajay Mathur to please deliver the theme address this morning. I don't think Dr. Mathur needs any introduction. Dr. Mathur, please.
Put it somewhere. Mr. Nigam, Dr. Ray, dignitaries on the dais, and friends. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I must say that this is an event that I look forward to. The Energy Summit of the Bengal Chamber and the kinds of themes that you choose every year make it interesting for me to be able to one, put my own thoughts in order as I come here, and more importantly, to hear your views, your thinking on these subjects. What I will try to do today is to very briefly discuss what are the challenges that we face as we move towards a more sustainable electricity sector. And by sustainable, I mean that it is sustainable not only environmentally, but financially, as well as socially. So, if we look at the big picture, what are the key challenges that we see this sector face? There's a host of challenges. In a sense, these challenges are well known. We know that something like 30% of the, or 25% of the households in this country are yet to be connected to the grid. We know that even those who are connected often do not get adequate electricity, and that this has to be a major social goal to ensure that adequate electricity is available to all as we go along. We know that we are depending more and more on imports. Is that really essential? What does that imply in the longer term? If we continue to go on that road, then we keep on importing expensive coal, expensive gas. What that means is we are on a path where every kilowatt hour of electricity that is generated becomes more and more expensive. We know that as we go along, we would need to reduce the emission intensity, particularly the carbon intensity. This makes sense for a variety of reasons. There is a global imperative that the carbon dioxide emissions are reduced. In a situation where a lot of Indians don't even have access to electricity, we can't think in terms of reducing the absolute emissions. But certainly we can think in terms of reducing the emissions intensity, that is the amount of emissions which are produced per kilowatt hour of electricity that is consumed by all of us together. We need to ensure that losses decrease. In a sector that is primarily dependent on fossil fuels, largely coal but also natural gas, the thermodynamic cycle efficiencies mean that something like 60% plus of the energy in the coal is lost during the conversion process. Then there is a greater loss that occurs during the transmission and distribution. You can imagine that by the time the electricity reaches you and I, 70% of the energy that was in the coal that came into the power plant has already been lost. We use it, and in our consumption, whether it is in a motor or a light bulb, even more energy is lost. Is this really sustainable? And finally, while we do all of this, we have to ensure that we are able to provide electricity at bills, I'm not saying tariffs, at bills that you and I can afford. That there is a willingness and ability
of every Indian to be able to sustain the use of energy and in turn also sustain the economically the suppliers of the electricity and beyond them the suppliers of the coal or gas. In a nutshell, these are the challenges. Now obviously, we are a large and diverse country, and the kinds of challenges, for example, that may be foremost for an industry in Howrah would be very different from those of a farmer in rural Bengal or those of a household, of an upper class household in Delhi. These will be very different. But the point is that all of these in one list of prioritization or another figure in what each one of us thinks. So if these are the kinds of challenges, what are the inputs, what are the kinds of interventions can we make which make a difference to these? Interestingly enough, there are only 3 interventions that make sense. And then, or possibly I should clarify this, there are 3 interventions as goals which make sense. And then, of course, to reach those goals, you need a number of what I call as nudges to help us reach those goals. What are those goals? Those goals essentially are ensuring that everybody has access to electricity, ensuring that we enhance efficiency on the supply side as well as on the generation side, and we increase the share of renewables. Now, again, we have to do this so that both the suppliers of electricity are compensated for their costs and the users are able to afford it. We have to do it while ensuring that while there is adequate supply, the emissions intensity reduces. We have to do it while ensuring that the overall efficiency of the system, financial efficiency, environmental efficiency, and the energy efficiency all become better. Now, if we have to do these, if this is the direction of change towards sustainability, what are the kinds of nudges that we need? And this is where I will focus the vast amount of attention. As we move towards that, the first question is it possible, for example, to go to a future with more renewables, more efficiency, and electricity for everybody? And the answer is yes, it is. The Kirit Parikh committee report looked at these scenarios, and one was we have a baseline inclusive growth. That means what we try to do is ensure that everybody has access to electricity. That was the first scenario. The second was we do this in a manner that also is more efficient, lower carbon. The interesting thing is that when you look at the two of those, the overall energy that is needed, and this is overall energy, not just electricity, is about the same. But the mix changes considerably. The ways in which you provide this changes. In fact, the key here is that the overall demand becomes less. So, what are the kinds of interventions that will make a difference? There is no single magic bullet that will help us achieve this. There is a set of interventions that is needed. I believe that the first emphasis everywhere has to be to ensure that everybody has access to electricity. That's one part. But also that there is electricity for everybody to use. Now, that's one of those areas in which this state has been a leader. The fact that there is electricity available to everybody at all times, the fact that even in the agricultural sector it's available and it is charged at a rate which is roughly somewhere equal to the pooled price of electricity procurement, implies that even these difficult political decisions can be made, as long as there is credibility and there is as long as there is a belief in the consumers that these changes would lead to a greater reliability and increased access. There is no doubt that this is an area where public investment is required. The Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana, the new government's 24/7 electricity plans, all aim to ensure that something that we have not been able to do since our independence, many people use the word that we have been criminally negligent in not making electricity available to all in so many years after independence, that this is rectified as soon as possible. This, I think, we need to take as a baseline. Now, the second issue is, how do you reduce energy demand? Because, you know, think of an analogy, think of a bucket. If you have a leaky bucket, no matter how much water you put into it, it will never be full. In a very similar sense, no matter how much electricity you generate and provide, if it is used inefficiently, there will never be enough electricity. We will never be sustainable. Therefore, the enhanced generation, enhanced supply has to be accompanied by measures that facilitate us, that empower us, that enable us to use electricity efficiently. For example, think of this. Why is it that you and I have not moved, all of us, to LED bulbs? And the answer is very simple: because they're expensive. Okay, is there a way that we can meet this? And later on I will talk about a possible model, not a possible model, a real model through which this has been done, and probably my colleague Saurabh Kumar from EESL, who has pioneered this in Pondicherry and is now going to do this in AP, would probably talk more about it. But the point is, it dramatically reduces the lighting load and the total electricity demand. In other words, while on paper, if you do a cost-benefit analysis, a LED bulb available today at, say, 400 rupees makes economic sense because of its longer life and higher efficiency. In practice, it is not adopted. Similarly, on the generating side, we have a lot of plants still operating which have got very low efficiencies. We need to enhance them. We need to also ensure that every new power station that is made is state-of-the-art. So in 2010, a mandatory order was put into place that new power stations have to have a minimum efficiency of, power units which of more than 500 megawatts have to have an efficiency of 40% plus, essentially meaning that they all have to be supercritical. And already we are beginning to see the impact of that in the average. Although only 2 supercritical power stations have come up, another 7 are under construction, but the impact of this is something that we already see in the curve. Similarly, on the other side of the spectrum, about 3,000 megawatts of low efficiency, low PLF generating capacity has been closed down. And I think we need to accelerate this close down, because the electricity that is produced from these plants, because of the low PLF and low efficiency, ends up being very expensive electricity. Apart from the fact that the coal that is being used in a most inefficient manner. So, a range of interventions can help us. We know about the fact that new buildings that we make can be much more efficient. If 2/3 of the buildings that will exist in 2030 have not yet been built, then it's a great opportunity for us, so that we ensure that every new building uses far less electricity per square meter than the one that was built yesterday. The Energy Conservation Building Code does this for new buildings, and I think 7 states have adopted it. My colleague Sanjay Seth would talk more about it, I'm sure. A number of states have yet to adopt it and are moving in that direction. I hope that this state also becomes one of the early adopters of the Energy Conservation Building Code. On Tuesday, we will release design guidelines for multi-storied residential complexes. Again, given the way housing is increasing, given the way how energy use patterns in our own houses have changed over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, I'm sure that in this audience, possibly, I don't know, 5 or 10 people at the most would have had multiple air conditioners in their houses. And today, there would probably be either 0 or 2 or 3 people who don't have air conditioners. What this implies is that on the one hand it's good, quality of life becomes better, but on the other hand what it also means is that for Mr. Nigam, he has to meet a peak load. I think the last time I was here, you had a storm and suddenly the demand came down, the temperature came down and the demand came down from, I think if I remember the numbers correctly, from 6,400 to 3,900 megawatts, some numbers like that. But it tells you of the kinds of challenges that the system produces. That immediately takes me to the point of, then how do we manage costs? Because if this high air conditioning demand has to be met for a short time, it means that that electricity is going to be very expensive. And we, as the users of that electricity, should be willing to pay that. Now, this means that tariffs need to be rationalized. On the one hand, as I mentioned earlier, there is a limit of people's willingness and ability to pay for electricity. On the other hand, it is important that while the poorest family on the one hand should be able to afford a minimum amount of electricity, it is also true that those who use electricity in large amounts for a short period of time, us as air conditioner users, should be willing to pay the higher costs that it implies. Again, this state, I think, has done that very well. I'm sure Mr. Nigam will talk about it, how prices, I think power purchase agreements have been rationalized, the tariffs for the poorest consumers have actually been reduced.